The question of why she betrayed him echoes in the young man's mind as he watches his beloved in the arms of another man who casually mentions that it took him some time to break into his house because the world had already ended. There was no longer a civilized society and power ruled everything. The girl says that strength dictated the rules and that he should understand and not bring shame. So the man grabs his baton and prepares to strike while the young man asks what he intends to do with him. 28 weeks after the world turned to ice, humanity lay buried beneath layers of snow. A man steps onto the frozen surface, leaving footprints, and an elderly man, nearly frozen, watches him as the boy passes by with a backpack. He removes his mask and inhales the cold air, saying that it seemed no one had explored this area yet, as comforts like food and fuel had become scarce and precious. The young man looks down from a cliff, noticing that the ice layers were deeper and assuming it should be safe there. However, the ground suddenly begins to tremble. He turns, saying, "This was bad," wondering if it was an earthquake. The frozen world was God's way of saying that human civilizations were as fragile as layers of ice. Then the young man plunges headfirst into an icy abyss, realizing that if he falls, he will lose his life. He grabs his equipment and tells himself not to give up now. Securing himself against the ice wall, barely managing to stay on his feet, he thinks he isn't slowing down fast enough. Eventually, he crashes onto an old store. Lying on the ground, he smiles, saying that he landed in snow and would have died if it had been solid. After all, as the saying goes, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Looking ahead, he appears anxious because the scariest thing in this frozen world was a three-eyed creature, which some call the white skins monsters that see humans as prey. The young man is about to finish his sentence but is startled by a white armor. He immediately flees, thinking that he is still far from being safe. A parasite crawls along the ice stalactites hanging from the ceiling. Just as the white armor is about to seize the young man, the ice stalactites are severed. They shoot toward the demonic creature, piercing its head before it can harm the boy. He wonders if it was just a collapse caused by the commotion, but quickly changes the subject. Either way, he was safe. Snow begins falling again above him. The boy shouts that more were coming. However, the snow only falls beside him. He is buried under the snow and sigh in relief, thankful to be safe. Yet he is now trapped as the parasite slithers toward him, creeping closer to his arm, which is stuck in the snow, and then merging with him, making the boy wake up suddenly, but with one of his eyes now a different shade. Kneeling in the snow, he asks what just happened. However, a blue vein had spread along his neck. Either way, he had been outside for quite a while now. Then he notices a chocolate bar and says he can't return empty-handed. He needs to hurry. Amidst a massive frozen structure, he reflects that with most streets buried beneath layers of ice, he should return using tunnels. But he isn't sure how much longer he can continue living this way, since it wasn't any better than living inside the buildings where many people had been trapped when the disaster struck. And with resources running low, no one knows what could happen next. After all, not everyone could avoid crossing the line. He approaches a corridor and looks around cautiously, noticing that no one is patrolling there. He should get home quickly. Knocking on the door of apartment 409, a girl with 2 buns in her hair opens the door. The young man asks why Ming opened the door like that, but the girl quickly embraces him, saying she really wanted to see him. She asks if he missed her, and he nods, saying he did, but he also wants to know if she locked the door, to which the girl dramatically asks if locking a door is more important than his girlfriend. The boy pulls out a chocolate bar, saying he found it for her. Handing it over, she is surprised and asks what it is. Soon realizing that it's a chocolate bar, she hugs her boyfriend tightly, screaming that she loves him so much. Pulling back, the girl asks if that's all, and the young man explains that he nearly got eaten by a monster to get it, so she should hurry up and eat. However, the boy's backpack is stained with blue blood. Growing suspicious of her partner, the girl breaks the chocolate bar. Sitting before a fire, he says he hasn't found anything decent in the past few days, wondering if he should eat all the seeds he managed to gather because he had planted them all, but none had grown. However, if he ate them now, he might be sabotaging his future. So he sits on the chair, anxiously saying he would go crazy at this rate. The boy picks up a piece of meat and says that if eating this was safe, then the people here wouldn't need to tolerate their enemies anymore. He throws the meat into the fire, turning it blue as he remarks that it was highly flammable and a good fuel source. Seeing a broken clock, he wonders if it was Valentine's Day. Scratching his head, he reflects on whether he had forgotten about it, but he walks toward his girlfriend, apologizing for forgetting only to fail in finding her. Outside the door, the boy hears a strange sound. That was the signal he had planned with Ming Ming, and he wonders what she was doing outside. So he quickly opens the door, only for a bat to come flying toward him, hitting his face with full force. The boy is sent flying an instant. Then the intruder steps into his home and wishes him a Merry Christmas, asking what he thought of the surprise while holding Ming in his arms. The boy asks if Chen Ming really betrayed him with Lu Dong, but the girl yells that he still wanted to know the reason when he had deceived her first with one of his chocolate bars because he had been stockpiling food and had a large backpack for it. Lu Dong slams his bat against the ground and apologizes to his little friend Mo, saying that he should at least give him a small warning. Since the world was over and now everything was ruled by strength, the weak couldn't even protect a woman. He had two choices: trust the strong or become food. And now Mo should hand over whatever food he had. The boy asks how it would be possible to hide anything from him, but Lu Dong doesn't believe him and declares that this would be the end for him, striking his leg with the bat, then hitting the boy's face, knocking out one of his teeth, even breaking his arm. It was a horror scene as they beat him until he lost his life. Completely injured, one of Dong's subordinates searches the entire house but finds almost nothing. Dong says they should be more thorough, demanding a knife. Then he cuts Mo while he still lies there. Lifeless Mo reflects that what he feared most had happened. If he had another chance, he would make them pay because he wanted to live, and so an entity grants his wish. Mo wakes up in an office, his computer still on his eyes, suddenly open screaming Lu Dong's name and wondering what just happened, because he had just lost his life, but now he had no injuries at all. There were only 28 hours left before the world froze over. With violent protests erupting in the streets, the police department had deployed a massive force to contain them. At the same time, the elites of Manhattan were drinking with their companions, and the gangs were making deals in the deepest parts of Brooklyn because no one in that city knew what was about to happen, except for him who had gone back in time. People admired the northern lights in the sky, but the boy already knew that they were a prelude. Then he looks at his phone, thinking that the only person who would call him at this hour was his girlfriend Ming Ming. He remembers her calling him weak, so he reflects that he had never noticed her true nature, someone who betrayed him in such a way. Thus he decides that he will cut her out of his life. He answers his girlfriend's call. She asks if he is working hard right now because the aurora looks beautiful, and she asks her boyfriend to send her some money since her credit card was frozen. Mo, however, tells her that they are breaking up and that she should stop calling him from now on, leaving the girl in shock, but he simply deletes her contact from his phone. As he walks, he reflects that now that he has a second chance, the girl who made him lose his life should just freeze along with everyone else on the Brooklyn neighborhood bridge. The time was 11:58 p.m. As the boy says that for this opportunity, he needs to prepare properly. In his past life, within the next 24 hours when the world froze, the temperature would drop to 0 and he had 28 hours. In theory, it seemed like a lot of time, but what people would do would only bring chaos and collapse. So realistically, he needed to gather as many resources as possible within an hour. Besides daily necessities, he needed equipment for self-defense amid this chaos. So he planned to look for something like a pistol. Police officers saw the boy walking and said he looked suspicious wandering around at this hour, so they should work together to apprehend him. One of them stepped out of the car and called out to Mo, ordering him not to move. Pointing his gun at him, he commanded Mo to place his hands where he could see them. His partner spoke into the radio, reporting that they had a suspect on 4th Avenue, while the officer asked what he had in his hand. Meanwhile, the young man analyzed the officer's confusion. He said he was just holding his phone, but the countdown hit 0, and he reflected that he didn't have time to waste on a pig like the officer. So he prayed that they would let him go after an inspection. The officer warned him that at an hour like this, he shouldn't approach without caution. Meanwhile, his partner asked what was in the backpack and told him to hand it over. Mo explained that it was just things from his office job, pulling a blue notebook from his bag. In a panic, the officer screamed that it was a weapon and fired a shot at Mo. The bullet raced toward the boy without mercy. The young man thought this was it. His chance to live was about to end here. But then he denied that thought, telling himself he would survive. His eye began to glow with electric blue streaks. An aura surged around Mo as the bullet approached. The young man wondered what was happening, because he could see the bullet's trajectory, questioning whether time had slowed down for him. So he tilted his head to the side, realizing he could dodge it and it wasn't an illusion. He cursed the officer, saying he was a citizen, and the cop had no right to shoot him. Then he rushed toward the officer, saying he couldn't waste time on fools. The bullet missed and struck the ground. Instantly, thin layers of ice formed over it. Mo moved so fast toward the officer that he left trails behind him, landing a punch to his face, shattering his jaw and making him spit blood. The officer collapsed onto the ground next to his overweight partner. The second officer trembled as he looked behind him, seeing his friend completely wrecked from the impact, wanting to know what the hell had just happened and what had done that to him. The officer fell to the ground in terror, pointing his gun at Mo. He demanded to know what the hell he was, but the young man calmly approached the man, saying that even he didn't know what he was, and then a single scream echoed through the Brooklyn streets. After the incident, the overweight officer reported over the radio that an officer was down and a suspect had fled with their firearm. He repeated his call, urging the station to respond. As a trail of blue energy formed ahead of him, he muttered that his day was cursed. Leaving a glowing trace behind him, Mo sprinted away, heading toward his home in apartment 409 and collapsing onto the floor as the energy dissipated behind him. The young man took deep breaths, shaken, wondering if what had just happened was real. Wanting to know how he had managed to do all of that, then he picked up the gun, determined to test whether he could do it again. He aimed the pistol at the mirror and fired a shot. His ice power activated, turning one of his eyes. Mo suddenly moved forward, catching the bullet in his hand. He grinned excitedly as he realized what he had just done, wondering if he had awakened some kind of superpower. Looking at his shoulder, which was covered in ice, he questioned why. Since the global freeze hadn't even started yet, could it be because he moved with the bullet, like a supersonic jet perhaps? He concluded that this ability affected his speed. It might not seem too sophisticated on paper, but with his knowledge of the apocalypse, he was already one step ahead of everyone. A knock came at the door, making him turn to see who was looking for him. It was an elderly woman named Mrs. Fang. She questioned little Mo about what that gunshot was. The young man made up an excuse, saying it was just his TV that he had broken the remote, and apologized for the noise. But the woman sighed, reminding him not to forget what had happened at the nearby supermarket. The streets weren't safe, so he should be careful. Mo thanked her and apologized for worrying her, but she simply returned to her apartment, saying that young people shouldn't overwork themselves. And then she closed the door to Mo's apartment. The young man quickly shifted his focus back, returning to the main problem of resources. Remembering the supermarket that the old lady mentioned, he realized it might have everything he needed for the apocalypse. So with a wicked smile, he decided he would stockpile his food. At the supermarket, the cashier yawned quickly while a security camera recorded the shelves. It captured only Mo looking at the food. But in the blink of an eye, he vanished into a blur. The girl didn't even notice, continuing to yawn in exhaustion. But then an enormous receipt appeared on her screen. She wondered what it was and if someone had made a purchase. Reading a note at the bottom, she saw a message telling her not to be scared and to go home to stay safe. That made the girl question the strange receipt. First they were robbed, and now they were receiving odd messages upon checkout. However, at the same time, 2 men entered the store. One of them had a pistol in his hand. The girl sighed, wondering what was going on these days. But then the man pointed the gun at her head and apologized because this was a robbery, and she needed to hand over all the money in the register. He told her to hurry up while an icy aura crept toward the store. The gun began to freeze from the cold. Then the entire store followed, coated in frost. A leg stepped inside as one of the robbers asked why it suddenly got so cold. His partner ordered him to turn toward the door. So he did, and came face to face with a tall, slender white armor. The thief demanded to know what the hell that thing was, what kind of monster it was. His partner immediately fired at the creature, but the bullet simply curved around its bluish blood. The thief screamed that they couldn't kill something like this, firing again as the creature's hand reached for him. The monster grabbed the thief while commenting on his face, slowly peeling off his skin with its fingers. Then it ripped off the man's face, saying he tasted bad. The cashier held up her phone, determined to record this. A video captured the monster devouring the thief. Police officers watched the girls' live stream on their phones, commenting that this format was popular. But then, an error message appeared on the screen, making them wonder if it was a government emergency alert. Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the city, warning all citizens. Mo opened his door, hearing that this was a broadcast from the Department of Logistics and Security for the Homeless. He was surprised it was starting already. The city was experiencing an unexplained cold wave, and everyone was instructed to shut their doors and windows. The cold wave was coming, and Brooklyn would be the first to suffer. An hour and 9 minutes had already passed since the beginning. Inside Building 58 of the new district, in an ordinary apartment, the alert urged citizens to pay attention. It repeated that this was a message from the Department of Logistics. Meanwhile, Officer Joe commented that it must be serious if they were getting involved. A girl smoked a cigarette while watching the alarm on her phone, and Mo used a screwdriver, thinking that there wouldn't be any setbacks. Lu Dong flicked his lighter and asked if the man wasn't going to talk. Beaten and bloodied, the man weakly said he truly didn't know anything. So Dong pulled out his phone, asking if he still didn't recognize it, demanding to know what was in that photo because he had drugged the boss's daughter. The man sobbed, insisting he didn't know at the time, but Dong crouched down, telling him that he should start praying so at least God might have mercy on him. Then he stretched out the man's hand and drove a knife through it. He mentioned something about counting from 1 to 5 inside his box. Inside the box were 6 severed fingers. One of the henchmen asked along what they should do with this guy, but the young man said that the sin of lust deserved death by fire, so they should throw him into the boiler. The subordinates hurled his body inside. Then they sealed it shut. One of them muttered that the boiler was old and might explode, but the other told him to shut up. Lua was waiting for them. However, the henchman near the boiler suddenly noticed something was wrong. A massive explosion erupted from the apartment. His friend grabbed onto his arms while his partner cursed, covering himself in the growing shadow. The screwdriver slowed to a stop. Mo declared that the plant cultivation structure was finally complete. With his current supplies, even if he didn't leave, he could survive for quite a while. But it still wasn't enough, because supplies would eventually run out, and sustainable self-sufficiency was the key. His plan was to build the perfect survival chamber, one that could sustain itself indefinitely. He picked up his phone, noting that the freezing phenomenon had been going on for almost an hour now, and he needed to hurry, because this was the time to speed things up, since in this world, time was life. But then a knock came at his door, and the young man wondered what it could be. As he opened it, he questioned why the sensation felt so familiar. Officer Joe apologized to Mr. Mo for disturbing him. Mo then asked old Joe what the problem was, wondering what was going on. Joe explained that the temperature had suddenly dropped, and the heating system was broken, so he was warning everyone to stay safe. Mo remembered something happening last week. The malfunction wasn't fixed in time, and when he had gone to repair it, it was already completely broken. He couldn't repeat the same mistake. He had to fix it, so he asked the officers to let him take a look. Then he closed the apartment door behind him. Climbing the stairs, the officers asked where he was going, and Mo asked if the boiler room wasn't supposed to be here. Joe explained that the boiler was in the basement. They needed to go downstairs. Mo reflected on how the boiler room was illegal in the apartment complex. Fang had mentioned it before, so it should be upstairs. He wondered if he was developing early amnesia. Inside the basement, Joe commented on how cold it was. Then Mo noticed something strange about the smoke. It felt like cold air. Joe led him toward the boiler. Mo tinkered with it, saying it should be fine now. But then he noticed a blue liquid on his hand and wondered what it was. Joe's partner asked if there was a problem, and at that moment, 2 white skins appeared behind him, exploding his head, while screaming for fingers, saying that they were growing back. Mo questioned how this could be a white armor, while Joe panicked, asking what the hell that thing was. Overcome with terror, he was paralyzed. The white armor prepared to attack. Mo activated his ability, immediately dashing in front of Joe and pushing him down to prevent the white armor from striking him. Then he sprinted away, muttering that old Joe had almost lost his head. He noticed that the door was still open, so he bolted toward it. If he ran at full speed, he could escape, but the white armor caught up right behind them with its mouth wide open.